G'day, Lewis.
Hello, Dan. How are you? Actually, don't answer that.
We'll get into that. We'll get into how we all are in a moment. The survey is still up, so if you're a listener to Irrational Fear, please hit us up on the survey in the show notes. Let us know, how much money you make so we can find a sponsor for this damn show. Also, let us know how you think this show could be 3% better. That's also good. Yep. Lewis, I've been toying with an idea of doing like an end-of-the-year show, but not like a big live show, just like going to a pub and recording, what we do here, but just in a pub. How do you feel about that?
I feel great. I feel great about that. I mean, I'd feel great about a big live show too. There, let's wrap up the year. What a year it's been.
All right, I'll call the Sydney Opera House and see how many rooms they got spare.
Call up the Opera House. They've got nothing on. Yeah, I think I have blanked out most of the year from my brain. So part of it would just be nice to be reminded of what's happened. Or maybe it wouldn't be nice. Maybe I blanked it out for a reason.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah. Therapy. Hang in there because we're about to get started. I'm recording my end of Irrational Fear on the land of the Darawal. Let's start the show.
The following program contains rude words like Mark Latham, blockchain, and Twitter. Irrational Fear recommends listening by immature audiences. Comedians, experts, laughing at the world as it burns down around us. This is a Rational Fear.
Tonight, Donald Trump is elected president of the USA in an event that can only be described as precedented. And RFK Jr. is set to remove fluoride from tap water, giving all Americans the right to bear gums. And the Australian government is set to ban social media for kids under 16. Critics say that'll just cut the rest of us off because they're the only ones who know how to use it. It's the 9th of November, and with 72 days until the inauguration, this is Irrational Fear.
This is Irrational Fear.
G'day, I am Dan Illich, host of Irrational Fear and former dog catcher of Maricopa County. This is the Irrational Fear podcast, the show that laughs in the face of the worst possible news. And 2024 has been a bumper crop for terrible news. Let's meet our fearmongers for tonight. She spends her spare time battling with Piers Morgan and breaking down the chaos of American politics on her podcast, The Bitchuation Room. It's Francesca Fiorentini.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us on this solemn occasion.
Oh, no worries. I was like, we'll do something else other than podcasting. We gotta take to the podcast. I'm back podcasting. Let's keep podcasting.
Well, I've got some questions about podcasting a little later on the show. And she was formally changed to the news desk at The Guardian, pulverising atom-sized elements of the news, and it's done pretty much that to her soul as well. But she's no longer there. She's right here doing the lucrative podcast guest spot tour. It's Amy Remeikis. Welcome, Amy.
Hello, thank you for having me. And unfortunately, I am still chained to watching every single moment of Australian politics. I just, get to swear a little bit more often when I speak about it.
Now, do the Guardian viewers or readers, do they miss you? Do they miss, having your insight there 24/7?
I think everyone's just a little bit overwhelmed, and my insight just tend to be like, well, this is all a bit of fuckery, isn't it? So anyone can do that.
And you may know him as the Hobber in Hobber and Hing, but to a small select few, he's known as the communications chief. For Big Ted and Jemima, it's Lewis Hobber.
Hello, Dan.
Welcome, Lewis.
Thank you. Good to be here. Yes, I assume you're talking about my recent work on the world of Play School.
Yes, I am. I am talking about your recent work on the world of Play School. Have you been nominated for a Logie yet?
No, I haven't. Not yet, but it's a pretty tough world. I feel like when you write for, I've been writing for the Children's Television Play School recently, which, Francesca, it's like a old running, it's been around for 50 years. It's like iconic Australian children's television. But it's a bit like being, this is a very Australian reference. Sorry again, Francesca. I feel a bit like Stuart McGill. Play School is one of the greatest television shows of all time, but it loses every year to Bluey because Bluey is Shane Warne. Bluey is so much better than anything else.
There's still Bluey in Australia?
What do you mean there's still Bluey in Australia?
Bluey's new.
Bluey. Sorry. You know what? My old ass brain went to Blue's Clues, but of course Bluey. I am so out of it. But no, my daughter is only 2, but we're about a year, maybe half a year away from Bluey.
Right.
But yeah, I know.
You've got a lot to catch up on.
I don't think Bluey is for the kids. Bluey's for the parents. You just cry every episode where you just go, oh my God, yes, I'm trying so hard. Thank you, Bluey. That's pretty much what it's about.
I just like how many American kids are growing up with Australian accents because of Bluey.
It's so
we
good.
have to take it back from Peppa Pig, though, because all of those kids who grew up with the UK accent, we've just gone, no, we need to take some of that back. Here is the new global phenomenon.
Absolutely. That now has 7 vowels in it. No.
I can't wait to come to America in like 10 years and have someone like, I don't know, put a gun into my face with an Australian accent. It's going to be exciting.
I thought you were going to say
order that America exists in 10 years.
Yeah, wow.
That's true.
I thought you were excited to say you were going to be able to order a bottle of water without having to say bottle of water. Coming up later, we'll be talking about Albo's social media ban for kids under 16 and what the new administration will mean for climate change. But first, let's get into fear number 1. This week's first fear. The presidency, the Senate, the Supreme Court, the House of Representatives, somehow the popular vote and also the unpopular vote. Fearmongers, how did the greater of two evils win in America? Francesca, what's going on? Please, for us, our small Australian brains, what is happening in the United States of America right now?
I mean, it's a perfect show. Yeah, it really is fear, right? It's fear-based, and it's feeling like you want the big idea, I want dumb big idea to make me feel less afraid of everybody else, of my neighbors, of immigrants, of trans people. I mean, Republicans put millions of dollars into anti-trans attack ads. Again, what small sliver of percentage of Americans, let alone the world, and yet, you know, this somehow is outshining the very real reproductive threats to 50% of the American population, and white women specifically throwing down against their own interests. It is the leopard face eating party. Like, it is the voting for the wolf when you are a sheep. And most assessments, and I think this is spot on, is it was the Democrats to lose, and they did. How do you lose to Donald Trump? He is so dumb. He truly did not try. He did not try. I think everyone needs to understand how little he tried to win this.
It was so evident, like watching endless streams of his campaign and just him getting up there and just dancing for 30 minutes. You know, that's like, it's literally he's just there to take attention away from somebody else. I feel like that was his whole game. Like, the weave is not so much a strategy as a policy, but a strategy to attract media attention. That's it.
Yeah. But I'm still digesting. I'm still sort of like coming into the reality. Like, I don't want to do 4 more years of resistance politics. Even like the old Trump jokes in my notebooks are like, are you serious? Are we really going to do this again? You know?
I was very last Trump campaign, I was in America doing jokes for Fusion, and I was there for 3 years, and I had enough by 2018. I was like, well, I'm so glad I'm leaving here. Now I get to go home and do Australian jokes. It's so much easier.
Yeah.
I was wondering, because I feel like immediately after the loss, everyone basically picked the thing, like, what am I trying to say? Everyone who had like a specific interest, every interest group said that their particular reason was the reason why they lost. So it was like, and some of these, I'm sure they're all valid, or many of them are valid to a degree. So obviously the big one was like Israel-Palestine was a really big one. There were people who were like, they weren't left enough. Mm-hmm. You know, there were people who were just going like, if you try to attract, you know, moderate Republicans instead of going further left, you're just going to end up losing to Republicans. Everyone was having their, like, throwing their little ball in. Are there any that sort of ring true to you?
Yeah, I mean, the Israel-Palestine one's interesting because there are people who are arguing that Kamala Harris did not throw down with Israel enough, right? And that is mind-boggling. I mean, she completely went along with that and has, you know, continually spouted even lies surrounding the issue, but certainly could not even be bothered to allow a Palestinian speaker at the DNC, could not even be bothered to sort of symbolically, you know, make a head nod to the very real pain. That being said, I don't think that was the issue. I think it was everything. And this is something that, I mean, the biggest thing though, let's do the biggest. The biggest is it's not about being left. It's about talking to real people. It's about working class roots of the Democratic Party that they've long cut out from underneath them. It's about getting back to, basic, a jobs guarantee that FDR wanted. FDR talking about the, housing, the right to housing, the right to a good job, the right to live in safety. All of these things the Democratic Party's completely left behind, cozied up with billionaires like Mark Cuban, taking a bunch of crypto money. And that was evident in the Harris campaign, sadly. And so what I situate the election in this broader, longer trajectory of the Democrats moving towards the corporate center, leaving behind the working class, and also understanding that 2020 was a fluke, It was a global pandemic. We were in the depths of obscurity and darkness and sadness. And only Joe Biden could have won in those circumstances. But that didn't change the fact that the Democratic Party has not had a winning message to the majority of voters. I don't even think that the majority of voters know what the Democratic Party's message is beyond "I am not Trump."
What I'm hearing from this is that the DNC is planning on a new COVID strain to kind of, get the team back on side.
Let's hope,
Is that what I'm thinking?
And with RFK Jr. at the CDC, I mean,
it's possible. It's absolutely possible.
It is really comedic. Like, it's just comical because if it's not comical, it's so enraging, it's so feckless, it's so ridiculous that you can't even look at it directly. Because it will, I don't know, you'll go crazy.
Amy, you've probably read every single think piece there is to deal with the fallout. Is what Francesca's saying ringing true?
Yeah, and I wanted to ask Fran because what is the Democrats' message? Like, who are they? Who do they represent? Because as much as the Republicans are, a fascist death cult, at least they're united around being a fascist death cult. Like, they're open about it. That's their message. That's what they're going for. The Democrats are like, girls can have blocks too. And yay, bombs, but with rainbow flags. Like, women are going to be doing the next war crimes. Like, what is the message from the Democrats? And what was there for people to actually come out and vote for? Because when you look at the voter breakdowns that are starting to come out, Trump did get in percentage terms, a little growth in voters. But what really happened was the people who turned out for Biden in 2020 to get rid of Trump didn't turn out again. So, why didn't they turn out? Because what was there for them? There was no point of difference in terms of Israel. There was no point of difference in terms of social justice. There was, this confused message that the Republicans are the most evil party on earth, but by the way, we're going to work with them and probably have one in our cabinet.
Yeah, the Republicans are the most evil party on earth. By the way, here's Liz Cheney.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't she great?
Yeah. So, when you don't actually offer any point of difference, you're just, as Fran was saying, we're not Trump. What is there to actually energize people to come out and vote for? And what do the Democrats stand for in this modern age? Because just basically saying we're not the other guys, it doesn't work. And we're seeing that in Australia, we've seen that in the UK, and we're seeing that starting to sweep through Europe. And there's this real reckoning coming for once left workers' parties where they have to work out who they stand for now. And if it's not the workers, if it's not the everyday people, then somebody needs to come in and sweep and start a movement there, because that space is wide open.
Yes. And to your point, that movement needs to happen yesterday. And I mean, I'd argue, obviously, in the United States, under the Bernie Sanders campaign, we really did see the beginnings of that. Sadly, national organizations have not been able to take real root. And again, we don't have any viable third party yet. But, like the Democratic Socialists of America sort of came to prominence, massive, membership drives in 2018, along with the Squad. And that sort of fizzled, and it has become, they do still good work, but it has become fairly sectarian and not a relevant player. And so we need, in addition to this inside the halls of power strategy to win seats, we also need this grassroots, a national left movement, a coordinated movement that has discipline. But to your point, I mean, there is a sociologist, an old friend of mine who sadly passed away, David Graeber, who's an amazing thinker. I'm sure you've heard of him. And he talks about this same thing that you're saying happens in Europe and happening in Australia, but it's the failure of neoliberalism to really meet anyone's needs truly, and then the not reckoning with that failure, which again opens up a massive lane, and it's not just neoliberalism, but also militarism in the case of the United States, opens up a huge lane so that Donald Trump can say, I'll be the candidate of peace in complete bad faith. But that lane hasn't been taken up by anyone. And workers, people, young people, students, we all see that neoliberalism hasn't delivered for us. We can't afford homes. We can barely afford our rent. And then also militarism. We see all this money and it's going abroad to, maim and murder children. And in 2020, Biden didn't capture the BLM movement, but he definitely benefited from that energy. Where in the States, we have no public healthcare infrastructure. You're left on your own. The only person who told me about COVID was a guy in a hazmat suit. And I was like, oh, where are you from? I was like, is this the government? And he was like, oh, I'm from the Church of Scientology. Come on. Like, of course, right? Even the Scientologists think it's real and they believe in, alien gods. So like, that level of abdication of duty, and then Black Lives Matter comes along, and we see all the money that we hadn't seen for months used to absolutely brutalize peaceful demonstrators. And we're like, oh, here's where our money goes in this country. It doesn't go to health. It goes into police. And that had a huge impact on the election. Biden never picked up the mantle of criminal justice reform or real racial justice. People just used it as some, window dressing. And same thing with Gaza. Look, I don't think Gaza was the only thing, but it has been the most, prominent, most politicizing thing that's happened to young people in a generation, right? It's George Floyd, it's Gaza, and the Democrats just absolutely left it alone. In fact, did the opposite, talked down to, accused the protesters of being anti-Semitic, chided them, threw down with the police and the administrators who were calling them anti-Semitic. I mean, it was a bad look all around. So this really is a death knell for neoliberalism and liberalism. And the last thing I'll say, and I'll shut up, I do really hate, yes, the sort of, we're going to do bombs, but like a woman's going to do them. Or, we're going to put a rainbow flag over our tank. I mean, that's truly IDF level shit. But I do think we have to grapple with the real misogyny. And how do we, for me, I don't know if we can go head on into it. I think we need national programs, whether it's Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, a jobs guaranteed, housing guarantee, whatever that is, that brings everyone into the fray, that brings everyone along with us, that I think can neutralize some of this racist, like whatever it is, like Joe Rogan, wider, bro universe, this misogynistic underbelly that really has galvanized so many men in this country. I don't know. It's like, or you just need to force them to watch the Barbie movie 8 times, because I feel like on the 8th, you get it, you really get it.
Is there the broification of Medicare is something I'd really like to see, just say, hey dudes, it's not communism, just like we have the army for everyone. This is Medicare for everyone. It's the army for you.
Medicare fucks. Medicare gets all the fucking chicks, dude.
It's like bombs for your immune system,
What
dude.
if you just promised that Medicare would subsidize Alpha Brain?
Yes, all the supplements.
From today onwards, the US government is going to subsidize looks maxing.
You guys, that will happen. First of all, what you just said is not satire anymore. That's going to happen.
The government's going to subsidize looks maxing, and they won't do transgender surgery?
I mean, they'll do chest surgery, but only if you're Steven Crowder and you want, pecs.
Well, everyone's just going to have to do the line test first to see, how manly they actually are, if they're leaning in to the beta or the sigma, or if they're standing up first. But I think what else is really interesting about the way that this campaign was played out was, and it goes to Fran's point about like, you know, how do we combat like this obvious misogyny? Like you don't have to go very far onto any social media platform to see like just, you know, dudes celebrating the fact that they won over women and that they'll be able, you know, your body, my choice bullshit that's starting to float around. But when you look at how the campaigns were run, the Democrats ran like a pitch perfect consultant like political campaign, like the door knocking and the canvassing and the entertainers and, you know, 12 economic Nobel laureates think my economic policies are better than Trump's and yada, yada, yada. Trump didn't do any of that shit. He just stuck to podcasts and social media and his little echo chamber, and he allowed that echo chamber to amplify his message. And while there is so much despair, I think, you know, coming out of this election, I think that people who want to combat that need to actually start using those same tools. Like legacy media no longer has the impact that it did even, you know, 6-10 years ago. It's not where people get their information from anymore. And so if you can actually start targeting people who can get messages out to those people that you're trying to reach, like, you know, like that's where all like younger people, Gen Z, are getting their information from. It's where people who don't trust the news are getting their information from. Why people within the Democrats have not actually worked out, hey, we actually need to start going down this route and talking to people where they are in their public squares instead of lecturing to them from the New York Times, is completely like bonkers to me. It seems like such an easy strategy.
We made a commitment at the start of this year to make this show more hyper-masculine, and I don't think it's really worked, Lewis. But interested to hear what you think in the survey. Hit us up in the show notes. Let us know if you think this show is too hyper-masculine.
Obviously, I've been lifting weights. I've been trying to get jacked. I've been doing my best. I've been eating a lot of elk meat. I've been in the octagon, Dan, and none of it's worked. I'm still a beta cock.
Speaking of the octagon, you know, one of the first people to speak before Donald Trump at the acceptance speech was the president of UFC. Oh. Like, it's truly weird, this like hyper-masculine space that Trump has driven this campaign through. And to your point, Amy, going on Theo Von and Joe Rogan, those are massive shows with huge audiences. And I know there was talk of Kamala going on Joe Rogan, but, you know, they couldn't work it out, or she didn't want to go to him. Do you think that was a big mistake, Francesca? Would have going on Joe Rogan fixed anything?
No, I don't think so. I think, you know, and I really think the manosphere is now in power, and that is terrifying. Because I agree, we need to compete in this space. But that space, just by definition, is a space of misinformation, misogyny, and like othering. Like people like it because it is about you. It's about the boys. It's not about, you know, women and people of color and, you know, trans people. Like, so saying we need like a left version of that, it's sort of antithetical to why people like that in the first place, because it really is speaking to grievance politics that are purely imagined. None of it is real. No one's coming for these guys' jobs, and but it is, that's how they thrive. So I keep trying to wrap my head around it, and it's like, no, but we can't, you know, imitate that specifically. But I will say, mainstream media's inability to even hire young pundits or have fun with some of their segments or have fun like shows. You know, I mean, Roy Wood Jr. got this like 10-run stint on CNN. I hope that continues with Have I Got News For You, obviously. And that, I think, is like, that's a start. But if you're only going to have like the James Carville-ass old skeleton-ass motherfuckers and or people who are coming directly from the Biden campaign, no one's going to trust you. No one sure as shit would ever buy cable in order to watch your show. So why aren't they competing? They're the only ones with money. Why aren't they competing? And I think it also does have to do with their corporate backers. They play it very safe, but still, you got to at least try.
Well, clearly what you're saying is
there-
that one of the big established networks needs to snap up Mu Deng as the next political commentator. As, you know, as Mu did manage to predict who was going to be president of the United States
did.
quite comprehensively. There was no question, like, boom. That was what she was going for. So, like, get Mu
Make
Deng
Silver
on.
out,
that's what I
Mu
say.
Deng in.
But I've got a question, Fran. Like, you know, these left-leaning echo chambers also exist. You know, TYT, crooked media. I mean, Pod Save America didn't save anything. Like, and, you know, they kind of build out ground games and, you know, door-knocking campaigns and things like that as well. Like, so if these things kind of already exist, but what needs to happen to make them more
I think that's a
potent,
really good question. And to Amy's point, look, I was reading into it, and it seems like, first of all, Kamala Harris's campaign, they had no runway. I mean, we're talking 3 months, no time. But it also seems like some of the door-knocking campaigns and the field campaigns were not as organized as previously thought. So that's just something to name. But also, you can't just knock every 4 years. In fact, some of the places that were most effective with turning, for example, parts of North Carolina blue were grassroots organizations that had already been working in the communities for years and years and years. New Voter Project, which is Stacey Abrams' project in Georgia, also had a hand in turning Georgia blue. But like, there's only so many times and so much work they can do every single cycle. But I mean, Dan, to your point, it's like, yeah, no, pods cannot save America. They just cannot. And I always think about those guys because it is so embarrassing to, I think, time and again, put your faith in the institutions in the United States when no one trusts them and they let us down time and again. I mean, I think, I forgot who said it, but the idea that like we're running to save democracy, which is an institution that most Americans don't feel like has helped them, or they haven't seen it in action. And take Donald Trump. Merrick Garland of the DOJ failed to hold him accountable for January 6th to the point where he's now going to be president and will never face accountability because they dragged their heels for 4 years. So even those things, it's like, not everyone believes in government because government hasn't always delivered for them. Democracy hasn't delivered for them. So you got to give them a reason to believe. And specifically, like, I just feel like people have to get much more involved locally in where they are, in tenants unions, in, you know, mutual aid organizations, you know, whatever it might look like, immigrant defense funds, all these kinds of things and groups. Like, it's about actually walking the walk because we're going to need it. Like, truly, I'm terrified. Like, I am scared, you know, because I battle like Piers Morgan ghouls. They really are ghouls. And occasionally they'll come after me online. I'm not too worried about it. But you see the gleeful, you know, white nationalists, you know, misogynists, you know, people like Andrew Tate and Nick Fuentes online. You see them just like lifting up someone's random tweet, quote tweeting it and being like, yeah, it's because you deserve to be raped, bitch. Like, I mean, this kind of level. And it's very unsafe. Black students are getting text messages in universities in Alabama that are threatening, that are basically like, oh, you have to show up to the plantation tomorrow, ha, ha, ha. Like, they're finding their phone numbers somehow.
Yeah. I saw a tweet online with a screen cap of a text sent to Latinos saying, you know, bring your things, bring all your possessions and meet us at this location. It's time to leave. You know, like, that's wild.
It's real mask off shit.
It's KKK, yeah.
It just looks like half of America just, you know, is now on the same side as the KKK. And from an outsider, that is terrifying. You know, like a big chunk, half of America now agrees with the Taliban about what a good leader looks like. And that is terrifying as an outsider, particularly coming from a country that is just so intent on following America down whatever route it wants to take, no matter who's in charge, because of this, you know, decades-long idea that Australia is America's best friend and we're just going to follow America down whatever route it takes. And when you look at how the Australian-America relationship was built, like the ANZUS Treaty that came out in the 1950s, it literally is built on the idea that Australia is under imminent threat. Like, that's what it's built on. And I think that says so much about how America has handled the world order, is that there are all these imminent threats. And Australia has, risks, but there's no imminent threat. And the fact that there's been that imminent threat has moved depending on where the politics has shifted. Like, it's gone from Japan to Vietnam to Indonesia to now China. And there has never been any evidence that there is an imminent threat that one of these countries is going to suddenly invade Australia and we're going to need the United States to come in like the cowboy and save us. That doesn't seem to play into the idea that maybe we need to start breaking the bonds of this alliance and grow up as a country and just be like, we do not need to follow America down whatever path it's choosing to go to as its empire crumbles.
With about 8 army bases and a superstructure based around information and spiedom in the middle of the country, maybe we've already been invaded by another country. But think about that. It's kind of interesting. Your colleague, Emma Shortis from the Australian Institute, wrote this great book about the ANZUS relationship. 2 amazing facts about that. ANZUS relationship, ANZUS. New Zealand left. They said, fuck it, we're out of here. We don't want nukes in our harbours. We're leaving. They kept the name.
Well, otherwise, Dan, it's ANUS, which just describes the relationship.
It's
We're
the
just
ANUS
licking
relationship.
the
We've got
arse
the
of America.
ANUS treaty.
That is so funny that it really would just be anus, and that needs to be the title of this episode.
This is a rational fear.
What is rational fear?
It's based in fear.
Taking the saddest headlines and giving them a little tickle.
All right, let's move on to this week's second fear, climate change. Climate has decided not to vote this year, instead bringing unseasonably warm weather across the United States. In protest, there are a few things that Trump's election means for climate action around the world. Fearmongers, I'm going to say a list of things. You tell me whether they're good or bad, okay? Let me know. Because Trump's in, we will see the scrapping of 1.5 degrees C as a target. Is that good or bad?
Well, it's pointless. We've already hit 1.5. So
Yeah, we're already at 1.4 in Australia. So, whatever at this point.
Rolling back the Inflation Reduction Act, the hugest infrastructure and emissions and climate act ever basically done in the United States. Is that a good or a bad thing, Francesca?
That's bad. I mean, what's interesting is that, a good percentage of those projects are already underway. And so if the Republicans, which they have control of the Senate, and if they gain control of the House, if they decide to roll that back, I mean, those are also in red states. They'd basically be saying, just out of spite, which is how they operate as a party, we're going to roll these things back that have brought jobs and also are moving us away from fossil fuels. But again, the Republicans cut off their nose to spite their face. That is how they roll.
With so many different parts of like the technology and production of anything that is moving a country towards like a more renewable future, if you stop doing it, all that happens is like China gets a bigger share of the market and you just set yourself back 6 years. And then when you try to start it up
Exactly.
again.
One of the amazing things about the IRA is that Biden basically said, yeah, we're going to invest in electric cars, but they have to be built here. And we're going to give tons of money for factories that have been built here. So you've got Volkswagen and Toyota and all these other car companies building specifically EV factories in the country. For that to go away, that's going to cede any head start that they possibly
It also might be great news for Tesla. If all competition is shut down, and that's if anything that's good for Tesla is probably going to happen.
Yeah. Here's another thing: privatizing the National Weather Service. Is that a good or a bad thing?
Crazy.
Who's excited? Who's
crazy.
excited
It's
for that
just
to be
going to be
privatized?
Trump being like,
Who?
it feels chilly today. That's, put it out. Like,
Who's paying for the weather? Like, who's going to go? You've got your $15 subscription for Netflix. Now you've got to pay for a $15 a month subscription to know what the weather's going to be like
What's amazing
tomorrow.
about a country like the United States, where so much has already been ceded to the private sector, is there's not much left to privatize. And the things that are not privatized, like the National Weather Service, are slightly important. And so, but you've got the Bannon, rat mentality of just like hollowing everything out. And suddenly, who needs the FDA? Who needs the CDC? Who needs, obviously,
Who needs the
OSHA's
Supreme
gone.
Court? Just privatize the Supreme Court, make it Giuliani and Giuliani and
Basically
Sons. That'll be great.
Basically it's privatized. God, I mean, this is the thing. Like, Australia's on my list of where to move. But, like, if I moved, it would be such a defeat. Like, it'd be admitting defeat, but also I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, there's also me who's like, what about just living where, like, I won't die from salmonella because it wasn't properly tested?
The amazing thing, though, is that we're basically dealing with, like, Timu fascists. And so, like, they're not, like, they've got the ego and they've got the grandeur, but they don't actually have the drive. Like, as Fran said at the beginning, Trump didn't want to win this. He didn't give a fuck. He was just turning up and just being all like, yeah, 75% tariffs, it's great. And that's going to be the thing that pulls them apart, because you've got, Trump Republicans in the White House, most likely in the House on the current numbers, and the Senate. They control everything. Trump is about to control the Supreme Court until 2050, given the coming retirements, that are coming up.
Oh, yeah.
There is literally every single part of the American system that Trump and his acolytes are going to control, but they're still going to tear each other apart. Peter Thiel and Elon Musk already hate each other, and they both have very vested interests in this administration.
Oh, that's fun.
That's going to fall apart. Trump is going to end up hating Elon Musk again. That is going to fall apart. JD Vance will probably end up, being sent to fucking Alaska or something by Trump on some special mission.
He's going to be way too jealous of Vance.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a great theory I heard that JD Vance is going to be pushed aside and they're going to put Elon Musk in his
Yeah,
place.
okay, yeah. But with all of the changes to the Inflation Reduction Act and all of that stuff, it's not going to change the weather. America is going to continue to get hotter. There are going to be more natural disasters. There will be another pandemic, sometime probably within the next 10 years or so. It's not going to stop these changes. And eventually, no bluster, no Joe Rogan podcast, no Andrew Tate tweet is going to be able to combat the fact that people are going to step outside and it's going to be on fire.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think America could learn from Australia and just learn that, they could be part of everything. They could sign up to everything. They could make all the goals they want. But actually, just not doing anything gets you the same results and gets you also votes. So,
one of the big things, apart from the Paris Agreement, which I think we can all agree is dead, but it was kind of tracking that way anyway. There's a big fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, which is now also going to be dead, because essentially that was the idea that all the countries would be limiting the amount of their fossil fuel emissions that they would be getting out, and you were only going to do it if every other country agreed to do it as well, because why would you agree to cut down your fossil fuel production if your neighbour's not going to? That's going to be dead in the water. So there is a huge gap in the international community that is going to have to step up and basically to say America's on its own, because China's not going to stop. India's not going to stop.
Yeah.
In its own weird way, Russia is, putting its own sort of like things into place as well in trying to control energy markets. There is going to have to be more of the international community, including with countries like Australia, saying it is time for us to act here.
Yeah, I want to just say that I do feel like the last year we've seen how much of a pariah Israel has become. Obviously people not selling any more weapons, trying to stop doing deals with them. The economy's tanking because of the ongoing genocide that they insist on pursuing. And I think the U.S. is headed that way. The U.S. is headed towards being a pariah state. The only problem is that we've got the biggest military on earth, so we don't go quietly. But in terms of climate, I do think one thing that's really important to know is in the first Trump years, the Transit Authority basically put out a report. And in it, they admitted that climate change was real, it's man-made, but there's nothing we can do about it, so we might as well raise emission caps on all cars, because who cares? That is why, to your point, Amy, it's a death cult. They really are okay with everyone else dying so long as, they can get the Neuralink implant, that whatever, turns them crazy. But so I think it's important to also understand, this is a horribly cynical move. I mean, it's a cynical administration. I'm sorry. I'm also just being hit by the wave of reality that is another Trump administration and like quietly screaming inside and like, because the other thing is like, I don't know whether we have it in us to like fight this. Like you see like headlines in New York Times, are people gonna fight or they're just gonna like, relent? And it's so disgusting to imagine us ever relenting to a Donald Trump administration. But I fear that could happen.
I also think, though, just the reality, though, means that relenting, it might happen in some ways, but if he follows through with the mass deportations and there's every indication, that he will, like he doesn't give a fuck, like he's going to do it, that is going to have giant impacts on people's lives. Like the economy be damned. It is going to suddenly, all of these people who have this mythical like immigrant who's coming for them, seeing their neighbors being herded up and taken away, that is a quite different reality, that because nobody ever thinks it's the good migrants, right? It's never the good immigrants that they think about. It's always these mythical, people that they're told to fear. That is going to have a huge impact. When the systems that have remained in place start to crumble around people like they did in the pandemic, that is going to have an impact. And given that there is no one else to blame now, they have control of everything. There is literally no one else that they can blame. There is no opposition here. They will never own it. But people who have just basically blindly gone along, I don't mean the true believers, I don't mean the white supremacists, I don't mean, the genocidal apologists, I don't mean, the misogynists or the people who truly, truly hate others. There's going to be just the reality where people have had chosen apathy, who have not looked at what's happening. Their lives are going to fundamentally change, and there is no one else to blame. And that is when you start to get people going, wait, there has to be another way here. And I'm so horrified that it's going to take just immense human suffering to get people to actually wake up. I mean, I've seen white women just being like, I voted for Trump because I like that he doesn't want to end abortion. And it's kind of like, when you can't understand that the words coming out of somebody's mouth and what is going on in the background in terms of what they actually want to do, you're in for such a rude awakening. And that is what is going to happen to a huge, huge part of the population in the United States.
Yes.
It strikes me the incongruity of a party that is campaigning on freedom that is just going to go and curtail a lot of people's freedom. Just from day one of the previous Trump administration, that Muslim ban that came in the early days, that was like the first uprising of many protests you saw across the country for 4 years. And to think that kind of energy is going to be expended again is just mind-boggling. And Francesca, it makes me tired. It makes me tired thinking about it. I don't live there anymore.
It's kind of a warning to every country also, and everywhere you are. But I do think that we need to be generative. We need to do something positive. We need to, and I don't mean like go plant a tree, although maybe it's planting a tree. I just mean like, we need to be building slowly, quietly, strategically. We need to be fortifying our communities and working on a local level. Let's make sure if I'm in LA, that LA is a sanctuary for immigrants and will not turn over immigrants for any kind of mass deportation plans. It will have to come down to those kinds of moves. But again, it's also coming down to like how I can, again, locally plug in. We will go insane if it's just orange man bad, resistance politics for the next 4 years. I truly I can't think of a worse use of my time. And so I just don't want to.
Francesca, also, it's also not directly up to you as well. You have,
you've
got a family, you've got a podcast to maintain, far out. I feel like, we're all getting to the age where it's like, let's let those 20-year-olds take over because I'm tired.
Well, I mean, not in Australia, though, because we're about to ban them all from social media. So
that's right.
Which brings us to our third fear. The Labor government pretends they can't do anything, but at the same time does a bunch of things. We end this week's show with a quick drive-by of some Australian news. The Australian Labor Party, they are already pretending that they are currently not in government, saying that they'll promise to cut 20% off student loans if and only if they're re-elected. But yesterday at the same time, the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, said that they're going to ban kids from under 16 years old from using social media in a move that critics are saying is skibbity. So, fearmongers, how will the government enforce this ban? Lewis, have you got any idea? Like how, you've got a soon-to-be social media user growing up.
They're giving everyone a lot of time. It's one of those things. It's like, look, we're going to give, if it passes, which is going to be a while, then all of the social media companies still have like a year to get it together. But it's a pretty broad scope. So it's because it's not just TikTok and Instagram. It's YouTube. I'm like, my kid watches a shitload of YouTube. Like the Wiggles are on YouTube. You know what I mean? Like it is kind of like, there is a part of me that's like, this is kind of going to be pretty annoying.
I'm pretty sure I remember when I was 14, I used to be able to get around a lot. I reckon if I was 14, I'd be able to hack the system.
Well, one of the things that they're trying to say is going to find people is that, there's algorithms that are basically designed to find people who are using language that they wouldn't necessarily be using as somebody who's in their 20s. And I'm like, have you fucking spoken to like a 20-year-old man these days? Like, you can't tell if they're 12 or they're 20.
That's true.
Like, how is the algorithm going to turn to work this out? So, but
I don't know. Coming from the States where like a bunch of, QAnon pilled like retirees were like help, in part storm the Capitol, or were waiting under a bridge in Dallas for JFK Jr. to come back, and we're drinking weird jungle juice from a guy with a parrot on his shoulder. That literally happened. Like it really isn't about age. It's at any age you can be duped and poisoned into doing whatever.
I hear what you're saying, Francesca. Maybe we need to have an over 50s ban as well of social media.
Given the way that the election went, I actually just think Gen X should be banned. Boomers chill, Gen Z chill, millennials chill. Apparently Gen X was broke way more for Trump. But yeah, this does seem like a super ham-fisted move, to your point, to not be able to control anything about these corporations, which is wild and undemocratic and shouldn't exist. And so, again, the right around the world is all about breaking up big tech, but they never actually do it. They hate big tech, but big tech is straight up just got Donald Trump elected.
I
think
wonder
they
with this.
pretend to hate big tech because, Elon Musk's whole project in buying Twitter was just to buy the public square and then just destroy people's ability to organize and to, spread information. And that's worked. So it's easy to say, oh, we hate the elites, but they're dining with the elites. They're getting advice from those elites. They're flying around in their planes. They're actually ruling. Tech companies control so much more of our lives than the states do. And while all pretending that they're trying to stop big man from coming for your freedoms, they are literally the ones limiting your freedoms.
If all of this is to protect kids, maybe at age 16 they should also lower the drinking age to 16. So kids have, the ability to cope with social media.
Yes.
Look, it's a funny one because there is this feeling of something has to be done, right? I don't know if this is it, but I also am at the moment, it is just unfettered access to the worst things in the world. And I don't know how to fix that. They're not going to police themselves because no corporation ever polices themselves until there's the most crazy reason to. Maybe something like this is going to make them come up with a better solution. Maybe a hard ban will force them to come up with actual protections for children to try to get the ban reversed.
Dear sweet Lewis.
Maybe.
But I do think you have to give China credit. Look at China. They regularly work with these big corporations because they're you won't have access to our market unless we can censor blank and blank and blank. And it's forever, whatever reason they're doing it, I don't agree with it at all. It's part of the totalitarian plan that they, enact on their people. But it works.
Brazil managed to do it with X, basically just were either fix this or get out of our country. And they were well, get out of your country. And then 2 weeks later, X was back because it's a giant market for them. And I think governments have forgotten that we are the product. We are their market. They actually need us a lot more than these companies need us a lot more than we need them. But governments are just absolutely terrified of trying to bring any sort of regulation to them. And that's why we've got these ridiculous FM policies, like FM radio policies, which are just designed to make it the fault of the individual if your child is being bullied or just exposed to the most heinous things you can imagine.
Australia is just about to spend $300 billion on buying a bunch of secondhand American submarines. Twitter cost $44 billion. Surely Australia could just go around and buy up a bunch of social media networks, run the show themselves. That would make a lot more financial sense than buying a bunch of submarines, which no one gets to use or see. I don't get to go.
No, $300 billion is conservative as well. By the time that final price tag comes in, we could have bought X about 20 times over.
That's amazing. I'm so sorry for that. We're going to sell that. What a lemon. No, and the other thing is I couldn't name them all, but there's only 3. There's literally only 3. I mean, I guess there's Twitch, but it's just
Google,
Meta, Google, and X.
Which means podcasts are safe, everyone, and kids can have access to Joe Rogan and Irrational Fear and the Bitchuation Room. And Amy, I guess an untitled podcast project coming from you sometime soon?
Yeah, sure, why not?
That is it for Irrational Fear. Big thank you to our fearmongers today. Let's get our plugs on the way. Francesca, what do you want to plug?
Listen to the Bitchuation Room or follow me at Franny Fio on all the things. I'm now on Blue Sky, FRANIFIO.
Amy, what would you like to plug?
I think everyone just needs to keep their eyes on Palestine and Lebanon and everything that is going on there. There is still no food that's getting into the north. We know that Israel has now annexed quite a large part of the north. So if you can support anybody on the ground who is able to buy from the existing food and medical supplies, as limited as they are, please do it. You cannot take your eyes off that.
Yeah.
Now I feel bad because I plugged I used my time.
It was a mind melt, and I knew what you also wanted to say. So, I just did it for all of us.
Thank you.
And can I just counter Amy and say the best thing you can do for Israel and Palestine is express concern. If you could just do sort of concern expressing.
Just varying levels
that will
of
achieve
concern,
a lot in the international community.
And, follow international law. It's worked so well for us.
And what happened on October 7 was bad, but genocide is also bad.
And just nobody talk about history and what happened between October 7 and 1948. We're all fine.
There's an investigation.
Yes.
Which one?
We will investigate.
All of them.
We can't talk about it until the investigation's over. Lewis, what
I
would
feel
you
like after that, all I can really say is my PayPal is at Lewis ISH. Send me money. Send money to me. I'm struggling at the moment. I'm the most important.
You will get money.
No, I agree with what everyone else has said, and I have nothing to plug.
All right, big thanks to Rode Mics and our Patreon supporters, also Jacob Round on the Teppanyaki timeline for cutting this one together. We're recording our end of Irrational Fear on Gundungurra and Tharawal land. Until next week, there's always something to be scared of. Goodbye.